landscape, what's in store for Irish businesses. So my name is Brian Honan. I am CEO of BH Consulting. We're an independent cyber and data protection consulting firm based here in Dublin. We have clients worldwide, and we offer unbiased, independent advice on matters relation to cybersecurity and data protection. I've also spent time working with Europol as a special advisor for them for 4 years in the European Cybercrime Centre. And I do a lot of work with the European Agency for Network Security, ENISA, and quite a few other things. I also founded and headed up Ireland's first computer emergency response team, IRISCERT, which you can find at IRISS.ie. And that's Ireland's first computer emergency response team. So hopefully I can share some of those experiences I've had with those various organizations to help put some context on what's been happening in the past number of years and what will happen for Irish businesses. I think it comes as no surprise to any of us in ICT that our society, our economies and everything else becomes much more reliant on IT and the internet. Everything from traffic to lights, heating, communications, we're all reliant on IT and computers. However, this reliance and the benefits we get from use of technology also brings some significant risks. We've seen some of those, and outside of the technical spirit, to include impact on voting on our democracies. We've seen reports of foreign interference in the US elections in 2016, the Brexit referendum in the UK, and similarly, I'm sure there's going to be certain similar influence campaigns for the 2020 US elections and many other elections and referenda around the world. Cyber has impacted how war is conducted. We've seen that from many years ago when Russia invaded Georgia. Many attacks were launched against Georgian websites and official websites. We've seen attack against Estonia on their infrastructure in 2008. And we've seen many countries now having both offensive and defensive cyber attack and cyber defense capabilities built into their militaries. From our perspective, though, while all these things are important and worthy, there has been impact on businesses too. This is the CEO of Merck Shipping, which is one of the world's biggest shipping lines in the world. They were impacted by the NotPetya ransomware virus, which affected every single computer in Merck Shipping. All their servers, all their laptops, all their desktops were all encrypted, and the big company had to go back to pen and paper for several months to try and cope with the ransomware attack. In fact, they only recovered simply because one of their backup domain controllers in a facility in Ghana had gone offline due to a power outage at the time of the ransomware attack. And by sending somebody from the UK to pick up the server, bring it back to their data center in the UK, they're able to rebuild their Windows Active Directory and get their systems back up and running. So I think a key lesson learned from the Merck attack is that don't rely on power outages in countries to be your business contingency plan. We need to have better plans than that. But you can see there from the headline, Merck reckon they lost, at the time of this interview, $270 million. Final tally has now been declared as around $500 million, so just over $500 million Merck lost due to business and recovery issues as well. So that was back in 2018. We've seen recent attacks. So Travelex was probably quite a significant attack earlier on this year. Again, they were hit by ransomware. They eventually paid the ransom, but not after significant disruption to their business, and many people couldn't perform any foreign exchange. Travelex has now declared themselves going out of business. Now, that's probably more of an impact due to COVID-19 than the attack, but I would estimate that the attack has had some influence on the overall business as well, and is part of the problem there. And we can see how things are happening. I don't know if you're familiar with the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report, but if not, I would strongly recommend it as a resource that you should look at to help you identify trends that we see in the industry with regards to cyber attacks and what you should be worried about to defend your networks. Verizon collaborate with organizations all around the world, such as law enforcement agencies like the FBI, the US Secret Service, Australian Federal Police, police forces in Europe and Asia, Europol and Interpol, also computer emergency response teams from around the world. So our research, we would have given details on our instance that we dealt with in 2019 to Verizon. So they can analyze all this data and look at trends and patterns, and the report is free. So some interesting takeaways from this, because what I like about Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, it is not a vendor report per se. So it's not restricted just to the vendor's customers. It's not restricted to the size of their customers or to the product suite that they offer. It has data from many different sources. So it is agnostic, it's independent, and it shows really what's happening to companies around the world and organizations around the world with regards to cyber attack. It's a very easy report to read, and you can see it has some very good graphics. So some of the key things to take away today is that, if you look at headlines from a breach, it's always a sophisticated attack or a sophisticated breach. But many of these attacks are not. You can see on the left there, 22% included social attacks. That's phishing. That's sending emails in and stealing people's passwords. And 22% of attacks involve malware. So computer viruses downloaded onto computers, which we have protections for already. But on the other side, you can see in the right-hand side, well up over 80% of attacks are due to brute force or use of stolen credentials. So people reusing passwords are using weak passwords or default passwords. It's a primary way for criminals to break into systems. So it's not sophisticated hacking against operating systems or applications. It is very much using authorized credentials that criminals steal by phishing or social engineering the details away from the individuals. And from an RSR point of view, we saw roughly just under 50,000 incidents in 2019. And a lot of these are down to Irish websites being compromised to host malicious software, to host phishing pages that are targeted against other people, or to use Irish IP addresses as part of denial of service attacks. So again, nothing overly sophisticated here in a lot of the instances that we're seeing. And if you go through the instance that we see from our research and from BH Consulting when we go and do investigations on some of the companies who engage with us, and from the Verizon Data Breach Report, this shows you where the majority of the root causes lie. So it's poor passwords. Unfortunately, password is no longer a secure password, and neither is password one, but there are people still using simple cheese passwords or the same password across many different systems. Systems not being properly patched. So if you take the Merck situation there, that was a known vulnerability in the Windows XP and Windows 7 operating systems that Merck had not patched, and the virus exploited that and infected their machines. And we see this from as well on vulnerabilities on web platforms, people using out-of-date WordPress sites or out-of-date hosting software. And that is a leading cause for many Irish websites to be hacked, is using out-of-date hosting software. And then out-of-date antivirus software or antivirus software not being installed properly or not turned on is another big cause of breaches. But I suppose one of the key things as well we see is that many of these breaches, when they happen, many of the organizations don't know about it until well after the event happens, and in many cases don't know about it until a third party tells them, whether it's a Garda Síochána, it's a cert, a customer, or the media letting them know they've had a breach. So these very often are the clear root causes of what's happened. So criminals no longer need to attack operating systems or applications, and we can deploy many of the technologies that are out there, and there are some very good solutions out there, many of them from Irish companies. There is some very good leading companies here in Ireland in cybersecurity. That technology by itself is not going to protect us. We need to make sure we have people properly trained in that technology and how to handle information and protect information, because human error can be a big issue as well. And from an Irish perspective, the Institute of Directors in Ireland carried out a survey where you can see the good news now is that 93% of directors rate cybersecurity as an important issue at board level. And we're seeing that in BH Consulting back in 2004 when I set the business up. Very often the only people we talked to about security would have been IT people or the head of IT. Now we're getting engaged by CEOs, CFOs, audit committees, or boards, just to come in and give them the assurances that they are secure. 41% of boards are saying there's a significant increase in the priority of cybersecurity. But unfortunately, 40% of organizations have no form of cybersecurity in place. It's still, unfortunately, seen very much to be an IT problem and not a business problem. Cybersecurity is a business risk and needs to be dealt with as a business risk, same as any other risk in the organization. And we need to try and get those companies to engage better with it. So that is kind of giving us setting the scene for the past and currently what we're seeing with attacks and what Irish companies may be hit by. So the key issues being the likes of ransomware, CEO fraud, etc. What about the future? Where are we going to see things happening? I don't see any significant change in the way attackers are going to alter their techniques or their ways of trying to access our systems and our data. They're like ourselves. If something works, keep using it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So they're going to use the same techniques, the same type of attacks. They're going to rely on social engineering, phishing attacks to get people's credentials so they can break into systems further. They're going to look at ransomware. It's going to be a major threat for us. And CEO fraud and invoice redirection fraud are still very much going to be significant threat factors and that criminals are going to use. And this is not, this is my reading of the situation, but it's also backed up by other well-known organizations. So Europol, for example, in their IOCTA report, the Internet Organized Crime Threat Assessment Report, they publish this every year. Again, it's another very useful independent resource for cybersecurity professionals to look at. And it gives you a law enforcement's view of what the threat landscape is and where they see cyber criminals focusing their efforts on. And an interesting quote from it, from a Dr. Jonathan Lusthaus from the University of Oxford in the UK, he's kind of reiterating there that the biggest threat of the future may be familiar to us already. The major threats we face today, such as ransomware or business email compromise, have been around for a year. And while we may see something quite novel, it's more likely that cyber criminals will continue refining attacks that have been shown to work. So we're going to see criminals become more efficient, look at more ways to improve what they're doing. And we see that in the sophistication of phishing emails. And criminals will adapt to the situation. So we are now, as you said, at the top of the webinar in the new normal. Lots of people working remotely. Lots of people buying stuff online. So criminals are going to exploit that new normal. They're going to be sending more phishing emails, pretending to be from delivery companies that you've missed a delivery or your delivery is going to be late, or confirmation of an order from online. Or indeed, many people coming into the summer may have had flights booked or holidays booked, and we're going to see fake emails coming from airlines, coming from holiday providers, offering refunds, etc. Of course, trying to lure people into clicking on the link or an attachment, and that's where they will then get compromised. So criminals are just going to adopt and become more effective in what they do. Another interesting report is a World Economic Forum Global Risk Report for 2020. Again, this is produced every year, and again can be quite useful to see where the leading minds think of the global risks to the world economy. And for the past number of years, cyber attacks have been up there in the top 10. Indeed, 4 or 5 years ago, the cyber attacks were in the top 5 risks. So you can see there in the top 10 risks of likelihood, data fraud or theft and cyber attacks are at number 6 and number 7. And the top 10 risks in terms of impact, again, we've got information infrastructure breakdowns at number 6 and cyber attacks at number 8. Those of you who are paying attention will probably see the number 10 impact risk is infectious diseases. I'm sure that should be given a major number 1 right now, as we've learned to our loss by the impact of COVID-19, the impact that it has had on society and the economies worldwide. I suppose it just highlights even the experts aren't expert all the time, and they don't get it right all the time either. Again, the top risk expected to increase. So over time, you can see there the 5th one down, cyber attacks, destruction of operation infrastructure was likely to increase. And this 7th one, cyber attacks, theft of data or money, again, likely to increase as well. So, but it's reinforcing that the risks to the economy, risk to our businesses, and risk to society is very much real, and cyber risk is something that we need to manage much better. I prefer the old adage of following the money when we're looking at attacks. So we would see where things are going and what's happening. And that's what criminals were doing. As I said, with COVID-19, they've been taking advantage of people in lockdown and how things are happening, and people having to work remotely, looking to exploit their fears and concerns. We've seen warnings coming from the Revenue Service about scam text messages going out looking about people with the COVID-19 unemployment payment and temporary wage supplement scheme as well, trying to get people's credentials out of it as well. But what we're seeing a lot is that many companies rushed to put in infrastructure to support remote working, probably infrastructure they hadn't planned or thought they were going to put in place. So many moved to online environments such as Office 365 or Google Apps, G Suite, other online platforms to enable their workers to communicate and work remotely. Now, in the rush to get there, security seems to have taken a back seat, because we are dealing with several organizations now who didn't secure properly their new cloud environments and have suffered breaches by credentials being phished. Or we're seeing companies whose VPN infrastructure, which was ramped up to cope with the increased workload, being exploited by criminals. So companies that have used the remote desktop protocol for Windows and installed that in a rush to enable remote working and IT to support systems remotely may not have secured that properly as well. And that's a key avenue that many criminals are using to break into companies' networks, install ransomware, and hold the whole network to ransom. So criminals will follow the money. Type of attacks we're going to see increase, as I said, they will exploit COVID-19. They're going to exploit cryptojacking. This is where vulnerable websites will be compromised and scripts and code will be loaded onto those websites to mine cyber currency using the browser that visits that website. So you visit this website, you have a vulnerable browser, the criminals have the script on it. Your computer will end up mining bitcoins or mining cryptocurrencies on behalf of the criminals, so the criminals are stealing your resources to do that. CEO fraud is going to increase and going to get more sophisticated, because as people become more aware of it. And CEO fraud is where criminals try and spoof or pretend to be the CEO or a senior person in an organization, contacting the accounts department or the accounts payable people to pay an invoice in a hurry or in a rush to cope with and to do it quite quickly. And that can be over the phone, but most likely I'm already receiving it over email. But other messaging platforms are being used as well. So it's important to make sure those who are looking after your invoicing and your payments are aware of this threat as well. Ransomware is becoming more sophisticated and more rampant. It's not a new threat. We've had ransomware around since the 1990s. But back then, in order for the criminals to make money out of ransomware, you had to send money by Western Union or by other wire transfer methods. And they were easily tracked and traced by law enforcement. Now with the explosion in cryptocurrencies, this enables criminals to better exploit ransomware. Supply chain attacks. So criminals will use your supply chain to attack you. If you're a larger organization, you probably have good defenses in place, but criminals are going to look down your supply chain and see, is that a way for them to get in? We have seen in the past few months several managed service providers, some of the managed service security providers who've had their systems breached in order to attack their clients. So look at your supply chain and make sure your providers are secure so that you don't become a victim through a trusted connection or through an email that seems to be coming from a trusted partner to do that as well. We are seeing more attacks against industrial control systems. Just recently, Germany announced that they had seen attacks against several of their infrastructure, and Israel identified that there were attacks against its water treatment plants that were trying to disrupt the water supplies. So criminals are going to use these two ways to attack and exploit money. They will try and maybe hold production lines, hold systems that are managed by industrial control systems or production lines or businesses who use these and hold them to ransom to get their production lines back on place. We're seeing a huge increase in the Internet of Things and those devices being used. Indeed, the Revenue Service launched a warning to all its staff with them working from home not to be discussing client confidential information near any smart speakers. So we're going to have to take that into account as well with people working from home. What devices do they have on their wireless network that could inadvertently undermine the security of your business and your remote workers? But indeed, in your business and offices, who's responsible for putting in smart lighting, smart devices? Smart TVs have been put into conference rooms, smart lights being put into buildings. Are they being secured? And also IoT devices, inherently by design, many of them are not secure, and these are being used to attack other systems and other networks. So while the devices on your network may be compromised, not to compromise your data or your infrastructure, but simply by the criminals to use it as a denial of service attack against somebody else and extort money from them, you could be taking part unknowingly and unwittingly in an attack. So it's important we secure those. We are seeing a lot more attacks against cloud service providers because more and more people moving to cloud, particularly with COVID-19. It's making those providers a much bigger and juicier target for many criminals. And we've seen some smaller cloud providers being held to ransom with ransomware, where their systems have been taken offline. In the US, there was a cloud provider for doctor surgeries who provided an online surgery management system. They were held to ransom and in fact went out of business because they couldn't recover their systems. But cloud attacks also will take form of user accounts being phished. So if you're using a cloud system, particularly something as critical as email hosted in the cloud, make sure that multi-factor authentication and monitoring is turned on for those platforms so that you can add extra layers of protection to those. And criminals will continue to target the human. Phishing, social engineering, they will get better at this and they will use it. Indeed, they are going to use artificial intelligence as a means for trying to change the content of their phishing campaigns or their social media messaging, because they will use those platforms as well to try and target people and how they phrase messages and launch their attacks as well. So how do we defend against all this? This is what we see is coming down. I don't see anything more sophisticated coming than we've seen in the past. I'd still see it's still going to be phishing, passwords, unpatched systems. So we need to get those done. But I would recommend that one of the first things we do is we try and identify all the key data assets that you have. Where are the assets? What information do you have? Where is it stored? Is it all in one central location on a big mainframe that's in a secure computer room with no remote access? If so, fantastic. But in many cases, may not be it. It may be on a server. It may be downloaded onto Excel spreadsheets or databases, on laptops, on mobile phones. It may be in the cloud. So where is your data? How important is it to your business? So you may do that rating on how critical it is to your business, or maybe on the value. Whatever way you do it, do try and identify and value what those assets are to your business so that you can know what's important and where you need to focus your resources on what you need to protect. And then do a risk assessment. What risks are there against that data? If data is being stored on laptops, well, then there's a lot more risk against that data than if it was stored in a bunker in a secure mainframe locked away. So what are the risks? And then how do you manage those risks? Do you avoid the risks? So do you say, no, we're not going to have a bring your own device policy. No, we're not going to put data in the cloud. No, we're not going to allow laptops. But think, if you do put that in place, there's business opportunity you're missing as well. So you need to look at ways maybe to avoid it, or probably more likely, how do you reduce that risk? So if we're moving data into the cloud, how do we encrypt it? How do we protect access to it? How do we restrict access? Can we manage that only access is from certain geographical locations? We can put multi-factor authentication in place. We can put encryption in place. How do we ensure and reduce that risk? If we're moving on to mobile devices, do we put mobile device management in place, maybe use containers so that we can just isolate our data on anybody's phone or anybody's mobile device and remove that container if there's a suspicion of a breach of that person needs? Or do we transfer the risk? Transferring your monitoring to a third party, that's one way to do it, or transferring the hosting of your information to a cloud provider who is dedicated to doing that can help you transfer the risk over there, or looking at maybe cyber insurance as a way to transfer the financial impact of the risk hitting you as well. Another key thing to do is establish policies. You need to have documented and well communicated policies to everybody in the business as to what they can and can't do with data and what they need to do to protect that data. And part of that is having effective security awareness training. If then you to ask me, Brian, what's the first thing you would spend money on if you're trying to put together a good cybersecurity infrastructure or framework? I would be investing money in effective security awareness training. Staff come into a meeting room once a year and listen to somebody drone on through a PowerPoint presentation. It's putting a way to engage people, is to develop a culture of security so they know how to behave when they're working with your data. I'd also recommend that you have to monitor and respond and look at, ensure you're monitoring the right things, make sure you have the infrastructure, the resources and the people in place to respond to a potential cyber security attack as well. Because if you're not monitoring, you're not going to be able to detect an attack and you're not going to be able to mitigate the impact it has on your business. And then there are ways we can use artificial intelligence. Many of the tools coming out now have these artificial intelligence features built in, end user behavior analysis to identify unusual behavior pattern by users or on your network to help you lock down and keep your systems more secure. So these are ways to try and make it more secure for you as well. And then information sharing. I think one of the weaknesses we have in the cybersecurity industry is that we're afraid to share information. We're afraid to admit we've had a security breach because the tendency seems to blame the victim of cybercrime rather than support victims of cybercrime. And if we can create an atmosphere, and the ICT Skillnet do have great meetings and opportunities for people to meet, to share experiences. Yes, we had a ransomware attack. This is how we dealt with it. Or this is how we dealt with management, bring your own device. Or this is how we migrate to the cloud securely. Having that information and sharing that information can help people an awful lot. And then I'd also recommend that regular assessments are done. Conduct regular assessments, ideally independent of yourselves, that you can get a good benchmark as to how secure you are against industry good practices. So regular assessments are very important. There are plenty of frameworks you can use. There's the ISO 27001, which is a worldwide standard. There's the US NIST cybersecurity framework. There's also the Center for Information Security, their critical security controls. And then there's the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity. They have published particularly for COVID-19, their top 10 cyber hygiene tips for small and medium enterprises. A lot of it can apply to larger organizations too. If you're from one of those organizations, it's well worth taking time to read it. And then the Data Protection Commissioner has published guidelines on how to protect personal data when working remotely. Again, something very appropriate to the times we live in. I would also strongly recommend going to the National Cybersecurity Centre in the Department of Environment and having a look at their 12-step guide on cybersecurity for Irish businesses. A very well put together guide, and it's free, and I strongly recommend people go and have a look at it. As you can see, there's quite a very interesting lineup of more talks coming up, and personally, I'm very excited to see not only is continue to talk about cybersecurity because as it's a passion of mine, but we're also seeing a lot more diverse contributions to the conversations. The speakers coming up are all female, which is fantastic because we need more diversity in cybersecurity. I know some of the speakers coming up and they're excellent professionals and definitely well worth attending these talks coming up in the future. Thank you very much for your time. I'll just now go to the Q&A. Have I seen any good examples of how companies have reacted after an attack, and any advice? So what I would say to that, the best response I have seen recently to a cyber attack has been the Norwegian company Norsk Hydro. They are an aluminium, or if you're from America, aluminum, a smelting plant. They got hit by a ransomware attack. Their whole production line was shut down. But throughout the issue, Norsk Hydro held regular YouTube briefings, press briefings, and were completely transparent throughout the whole issue about how the attack, and let people know what they were doing along the way, what the impact was. So my advice to any business who suffers a cybersecurity attack is, well, first thing is prepare for the attack now. Look at how you're going to respond, not just from a technical point of view, but this is a business issue. So you're going to need people from your media team, people from PR, people from HR, because you may have an internal threat. You may more likely have lots of people you're going to have to work extra hours. So you're going to need help there. You may need help from legal on how you need to do things, your data breach as well, on how you could respond to. So be transparent and be open. One of the phrases I hate when companies have been hit by a cybersecurity attack is that the attack was a sophisticated attack by state-sponsored attackers, and then a few weeks later we learned it wasn't sophisticated after all. So that's a very good question. Thank you for that. So do look at the Norsk Hydro attack. It is a very good case study on that. Other question is if a major US military contractor like WestTech International cannot protect themselves from hackers, what chance do other organizations have? I think the first thing we need to understand and appreciate is that there is no such thing as 100% security. We cannot protect everything, and we cannot protect 24/7. There's always is going to be the risk as to what the breach is going to be. So be prepared for a breach. I would say do try and do the fundamentals and the basics. That is an annoying phrase in many ways because the basics sound simple. Patch your systems, train users, have up-to-date antivirus software, have firewalls installed, review your systems regularly. That actually can be quite hard to do. Any of you who've had to manage a large network will realize trying to manage 10,000 laptops or 10,000 PCs with legacy systems is not as easy. So it is a tough one to do. Except there could be an attack. Be prepared for how to respond, because today my firm belief is you're not going to be ridiculed or vindicated because you've suffered an attack. You will be ridiculed or vindicated by how you respond to the attack. And as I said, the Norsk Hydro one is a very good one. Compare that with the EasyJet breach, where they came out and said it was a sophisticated attack straight away. The data doesn't support that assertion. So thank you for that question. Another question is, should you get it based on a very security posture is that current before implementing technologies? And there's a list of technologies there. I would suggest yes, particularly if you're trying to figure out what is the impact you're trying to do and what is you're trying to present, because at the end of the day, you're going to be spending money, you're going to be spending time and resources to implement a solution. Your business people are going to look and ask you, what is the benefit of that? So you need to sort of say, look, this is how secure we are now. By implementing this, this is where we've moved on. Now, don't be surprised though if there isn't a huge jump in what happens, but always do look at ways to try and assert and look at your assessment. And to be quite frank, I would look at it as a cyber assessment being more than just technology, but it's the whole thing about security awareness, process and procedure, policies, responsibilities as well. Do you think that this pandemic will be a valid excuse to give the Data Protection Commissioner should they have a data breach? And I can assure you that the Data Protection Commissioner will not take COVID-19 as a valid excuse for having a data breach or delaying in notifying them. The Data Protection Commissioner will be expecting you to continue business as normal and to be able to notify them and to adhere to data subject access rights accordingly. So, unfortunately, COVID-19, I don't see that being as a valid excuse to go to the Commission and say we had a breach because of COVID-19, or it took us a long time to respond to that subject access request, or a long time to notify you we had a breach because of COVID-19. That's the end of the questions. I sincerely hope you found this a useful presentation. Please feel free to contact me with any additional questions or follow-ups. And I'd like to thank ICT Skillnets and Technology R&D ICT for providing me the opportunity to present to you. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this webinar, please follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to be kept up to date with all our news, events and programs. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this one.